Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for the Pegasus, which is episode 12 of season 7 of Star Trek The Next Generation. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Next Generation, one episode at a time. In this video, I cover the 7th season episode Pegasus. So Pegasus is the episode in which a former commander of Riker, Admiral Pressman, comes on board the Enterprise with a mission to find the very ship that he and Riker served on in the past that is lost somewhere in the asteroid belt. However, it turns out that the Romulans are also looking for this ship, as it contains apparently valuable experimental scientific equipment. So there begins to be hinted that there's a mysterious backstory between the Pegasus and how it was destroyed, and Picard tries to hunt for the truth and is unable to find it because it's buried and being classified, but he does learn that there was a mutiny on board the ship, in which Riker admits that he joined Admiral Pressman in fighting off the mutineers, and a few of them managed to escape before the ship was destroyed. Captain Picard's not happy with the fact that Riker is keeping secrets from him, but he was ordered to do so by an admiral who outranks him, but Picard makes it clear to Riker that his first duty is the safety of the Enterprise. So they discover the ships materialized halfway inside of an asteroid, so they bring the Enterprise into the asteroid to try to retrieve the Pegasus, but while they're doing that, the Romulans seal the Enterprise inside the asteroid, leaving them trapped there, and the Romulans offer to beam them out of there and take them back to Romulus, where they will be returned to the Federation. Picard, of course, doesn't want to do this, and Riker offers them an alternative, saying that the piece of equipment that Pressman retrieved from the Pegasus is in fact a Federation cloaking device, specifically an phasing device that would allow the Enterprise to phase past solid material. This is illegal because the Federation signed a treaty with Romulus 60 years ago that outlaws them from creating cloaking technology. But Pressman and a few high-up admirals decided to defy this law to give the Federation more of an edge. So they used the interphasing device to get out of the asteroid. However, once they were out, Picard dephases or uncloaks the ship right in front of the Romulans, revealing this to the Romulans and then arresting Admiral Pressman for defying the treaty. At first, Riker insists he must be arrested as well because he helped Pressman, but Picard goes in and forgives Riker immediately and says that he ultimately did the right thing. So, this is, for the most part, seen as one of the better episodes of Season 7. This is something that I agree with. I think this is a pretty powerful episode. Always enjoyed this episode. It's funny because I didn't know before who wrote it, but just from this episode, I was like, I bet you Ronald D. Moore wrote this, because this seems like a Ronald D. Moore script. And sure enough, and when the credits came up, written by Ronald D. Moore. So it just noticed me this, since I'm getting so into Star Trek and rewatching these episodes over and over again and studying the writer's room and the writers, I'm starting to get used to the writing style, and I'm able to sort of pick out who the writers are. I forgot to mention my review for Rivals over in Deep Space Nine that was written by Joe Manowski, a writer I don't really care for, and so that made total sense. I was like, of course Joe Manowski wrote this script. But Yeah, but Ronald D. Moore is a writer that I care for. But I recognize his style of writing because Pressman reminded me a bit of Jellicoe. And the fact of the young cadets being dumb and stupid and impressionable, like is what Riker says what he was as an ensign when he was younger, that he was too stupid to realize that he chose the wrong side. That tends to go along with Ronald D. Moore, who tends to write cadets like that. First Duty, he wrote, and then the episode Valiant in Deep Space Nine, which I think he went too far, and I have a lot of issues with that episode, but that is a topic for another time. In this episode, I actually think it does really work. Everyone, I'm sure, can relate to having done some dumb and stupid things when they were younger. And this actually plays off in a very interesting way. Now, I have heard some opinions that perhaps this was a sudden and bit of a jarring character change to suddenly get this backstory of Riker that sort of recontextualizes the character and perhaps doesn't quite fit into the Riker we knew, because they describe his younger self as being very humorless and jaded and all about following the rules. And some people I've heard even say that does not at all fit with Riker, because we see that he's very jocular and sort of is willing to skirt the rules and has more of a sort of lively, jocular attitude on life. But I can totally buy this, because it happens in real life a lot, where people will go through massive character changes. I buy it a hell of a lot more than I buy Nog's character change during Deep Space Nine, but again, that is a topic for another time. But this also is another signature of Ronald D. Moore, he does love retconning, or at least like changing up and recontextualizing characters. Sometimes I have issues with how he does it, but other times, like this episode, I do not. I think it can actually liven the show, and I think even though it does recontextualize the character of Riker, I think it ultimately fits, and it makes this character way more interesting in a way that is not too unbuyable, such as the Bashir retcon, which I do believe Ronald D. Moore is also responsible for, which I just don't buy it, where here do buy it, and so it actually does make the character a bit more interesting in that regard. And plus, this episode features an amazing guest star with Terry O'Quinn playing Admiral Pressman. He, of course, is probably most well known for playing John Locke on Lost. Now, this is the first time I was familiar with Terry O'Quinn, so the subsequent times that I saw him after this, I just say, hey, it's Admiral Pressman. And the next time I did see him, where I recognized him from this episode, wasn't Lost. It was actually the X-Files movie. He actually appeared like 3 or 4 times playing different characters on the X-Files, but I didn't watch the show regularly, so I didn't see any of his other appearances until later. But I did see the movie when it first came out, and he was in one of my favorite scenes of the movie where there's this bomb in this government building, and he goes in as like a high-ranking, bomb diffuser FBI guy, comes in to defuse the bomb, and he sits there and just does nothing and waits until the bomb explodes. In other words, he was ordered to give his life to make sure that the bomb did explode, because there was the CIA cover-up, or deep state, X-Files. But it was a great scene with like the explosion and like Mulder and Scully going, don't do it. But anyway, point is, when I first saw that, I'm like, hey, it's Admiral Pressman. And then, of course, later, Lost. When I saw Lost for the first time, I was just watching a random episode, and I was recognizing, like, all the actors, like, oh, it's Mary from Lord of the Rings, it's the dude in the wheelchair from Oz, and, oh, look, it's freaking Admiral Pressman. Like, it's like all these characters from all these other shows, which is what first intrigued me to watch Lost. But, yeah, Terry O'Quinn ended up being like one of the his performances in Lost were amazing. He was one of the highlights of Lost. He was one of the staples. He was known as like an absolutely amazing actor. Like, so that show made him beyond just Admiral Pressman. It just showcased how great of an actor he is. But so now when I watch this episode, I see John Locke. I see, don't tell me what I can't do. But and I keep expecting him to tell Riker about how they need to go back to the island. But anyway, but no, it shows that he's a really good actor, and he does give a really good performance in this episode as Admiral Preston. I really buy him. Now, one thing I do remember, another memory I have of when this episode first came out, is I remember hanging out with my friend at this retreat, and we were just quoting like movie cliches to each other back and forth. Just none like specific quotes, but just like random stuff that you hear in movies all the time. I can't remember the one he was saying. It's like, I don't know, just the action movie lines that you hear all the time. And I remember the one that I was saying a lot was, I made you and I can break you just as easily. And I don't think I realized at the time that I was specifically quoting this episode, but then I watched, I was like, hey, that's probably where I got it from. But I'm sure I've heard it in like other movies and shows before, so that always makes me, every time I hear that line, it makes me think of that. I made you and I can break you just as easily. But no, he does do a really good job and elevates the episode, and I think he is maybe not a better captain than Jellicoe, but he's definitely a more complex character, I think. I know there's a lot of Jellicoe defenders out there, but I'm still 100% that he's like the worst captain, a terrible captain. I dare say, like, this Pressman is not as bad as Jellicoe. I'm sorry, I'll have to fight people on that. But I'm not saying he's a great captain, obviously, but he didn't go in and try to change the 4-shift rotation when the Enterprise give him that. He didn't go in acting like I'm doing this and I'm doing that. He did at least let Picard command the ship, and he only gave orders when it was vital to the mission. It was actually very respectful for that case. So as far as I can see, he was actually an okay captain, but he obviously was a bit of a shady fellow, as we learned that he was a part of this conspiracy to defy this treaty, and apparently, and like the head of Starfleet Security was involved in this conspiracy, but apparently it was just a conspiracy. It was limited to a specific group of people, because once it was exposed, those people got arrested. And they don't ever explain what happened to him, because I do love his line at the end when Picard arrests him and he says, I have friends, I have a lot of friends in high places, and Picard's just like, you're going to need them. So I'm curious to see if his friends managed to get him out of this, or at least soften the blow, or if they were like, nah, fuck this, or they just abandoned him. But I do love his kind of attitude, because the whole time he was putting this attitude as like, you know, you listen, do what I say, or else your career is over, or else you're gone, you're nothing, you'll be destroyed. He was having this authority of having all these friends in high places. Like, I love how when Riker revealed the cloaking device to Picard, he said, you just ended your career. Like, he had that chip on his shoulder, and I think for good reason. You do get this impression that it's not just bluster, that he does have this authority behind him, and I think that really does strengthen this character. And also, I think some people don't like what they did to Riker's character in this episode, but I actually love it. Some people thought he was let off the hook too easily. I heard this opinion that, he only told Picard about the cloaking device when it was the only thing that could save their lives. So it's not really giving him any credit for doing the right thing, where I disagree, because he was given orders by an admiral to not tell Picard anything. If he defied those orders, he could get court-martialed, not just losing his career or damaging his career. He could lose his whole Starfleet career. He could be seen as an untrustworthy officer. Now, and if the ending played out differently and the Pressman wasn't exposed and he got his way, things could have went very differently for Riker if he just flat out defied orders. He could have been court-martialed. He could have been arrested right away. And so he was put in a predicament that he had to follow orders, but he didn't want to. And Picard sort of outlined it to him. It was like, look, he's an admiral. He outranks me. You have to follow his orders. I get it. But I'm trusting you with the safety of the ship and to not let him do anything to endanger the ship, regardless of orders. And if I found that trust is unjustified, then I'll have to re-examine the command structure on this ship. And I love that. It seems really harsh to Riker. In fact, some people compare this to Picard dressing down Wesley in the First Duty. Or I think it's kind of similar, but it's different actually. I think it's less sort of authoritative, less sort of I'm disappointed in you, you fucked up, now do the right thing, god damn it. It's less of that than it was in the First Duty. It's more of a warning. Whereas the Wesley thing was more of you fucked up, now do the right thing, where this is more like, okay, but I'm trusting you not to fuck up, so don't fuck up, and if you do, then I don't know if I can trust you ever again. So it's more along those lines of a warning of orders or no, do not let him damage the ship, and I am trusting you to do that. And Riker was worthy of that trust. He followed orders up to a point, but when he realized that the safety of the ship was at risk, that point was gone, and he was bold enough to defy orders and do the right thing. And that's why I think it was kind of unjustified to arrest Riker, and this is why I think I'm perfectly happy with Riker being let off the hook, because he was in a rock and a hard place. He was following orders from his superiors, but when it came down to it, when things were at risk, he was willing to do the right thing and defy orders. So I'm 100% on Riker. I think he did it. He was in a bind, and it was completely understandable, and when push come to shove, he did the right thing. Where other officers who might not be willing to defy orders, even when it came down to it. They might be, I'm not going to defy Pressman because he's going to try to destroy my career, period. In fact, if there's one complaint I have about the ending of this episode, is that Pressman went down a bit too easy. Especially considering like all the bluster about I have friends in high places. I would have liked it if it had been like they got a call from Starfleet saying that, Pressman is off the hook, and they came up with some bullshit excuse and actually reprimanded Picard for interfering. Like, that would have been actually a nice little twist if they threw that in. And plus, something I can throw in from retrospect, and I think I've heard other sort of novels or B canon propose this idea that Section 31 was involved with this conspiracy with Admiral Pressman. Now, obviously, Section 31 as a concept hadn't been thought up of yet. And recall, in this era of Trek, Section 31 was still a rogue, independent, like shadow organization, and not like a known branch of Starfleet intelligence like it is in the fucking modern Trek. And that's something that irritates me about modern Trek. But putting that aside, so they could have been like behind this and sort of pulling the strings in the shadows. And so in that regard, I think once Pressman was caught, they either could have used him as a scapegoat to escape any responsibility for their involvement in it, or they could have pulled the strings behind the scenes, because I'm sure they have a lot of allies in high places to get Pressman off the hook. It depends on how useful they think Pressman would be for their future events. But again, this is all this headcanon that's in my head that's not covered in the episode itself. Another aspect of this episode I really liked is the Romulan commander. This is the first time they got a black actor to play a Romulan, so we saw a black Romulan. I remember some people being like, oh my god, a black Romulan. But why not? And we see more black Romulans going forward, particularly modern Trek, and why wouldn't there be? I think, having a problem with that is ridiculous. But anyway, I love this character. He was, I think, even more so than most other Romulan commanders we've seen. He was like the flat out, oh, I'm so here to help. Oh, forgive me. Oh, let me be your friend. Where, of course, underneath that, you knew that was total bullshit and he was deceiving you the whole time. And it was so rich. Like when the Romulan vessel decloaked right in front of the Enterprise. And obviously they did that on purpose to scare them or to sort of mess with them. And Picard was just like, oh, it would have been a shame if, your ship got damaged due to some misunderstanding. He's like, I am touched by your concern for my ship, but I don't think we were actually ever in any danger. Just the way, and I love how he never calls out Picard for his bullshit. He just plays along with him. And when he was like, oh, we're in here doing some astrological research, and Picard's like, oh, so are we. Maybe we can, collaborate and pull our resources. And he's like, I don't think our goals would be compatible. So they both know what's going on, but they play that facade. Even at the end, when he when they destroy the cavern and bury them inside, and obviously they're doing that because they realize the Enterprise found the Pegasus, and so oh well, fuck them, let's trap them inside so we get the upper hand. And when Picard calls them, he's like, are you responsible for this? Oh, I might have been. We were doing some tests on the asteroid surface. If you had told us, if we had known you were in there, we would have been more careful. And then Picard just drops the facade and was like, what do you want? And yells at him. But the Romulan doesn't drop the facade. He continues oh, we don't want anything, but we will offer some help. We'll beam your crew up, and after a short stay in Romulus, we will return you to the Federation. And the short stay, of course, involves interrogation. And as Picard pointed out, they're going to come back and get both ships, both the Enterprise and the Pegasus, and so they can't just abandon it. I do wonder, though, what they would have done if they didn't have that interphasic device. I mean, obviously, for plot convenience, they did. But I wonder if because they wouldn't, just subvert to the Romulans' plans. I mean, is there any way why they couldn't just call Starfleet and call for reinforcements? I guess the Romulans could destroy the asteroid in the meantime if they did that. Or maybe they would try Worf's plan of using the phaser, even though it could very much destroy the ship. Better to destroy the ship than give it to the Romulans. So, I don't know, but that is, I do love that Romulan commander. He was definitely one of my favorite Romulan. Another really big highlight of the episode. So, speaking of the Romulans, I guess I'll get into the Treaty of Alderaan. This is another situation. So this is the first episode that mentions the treaty that prevents the Federation from creating cloaking technology, which again, this is another sort of similar to the Chase. It's another plot point that was put in there in order to plug a plot hole, this time plugging the plot hole of why the Federation and Starfleet never developed cloaking technology. Now, behind the scenes, the reason why this was never written that way is because Gene Roddenberry forbade it, saying that the Federation do not sneak around, that the Starfleet's more honorable and they don't sneak, which is stupid. So Ronald D. Moore came up with a better explanation that actually makes more sense in universe, that hey, in order to create peace between Romulus, the Starfleet agreed to not develop cloaking technology. Now, I've heard different opinions on the practicality of that, and some people saying that Federation was dumb and a bunch of idiots for doing this. I can understand this being like a necessity if in order to avoid an out-and-out war, because apparently there was this Tomed incident that was mentioned in Defector, and retroactively people were saying the treaty was formed after this incident. People don't know in canon what the hell that incident is. Apparently there was a novel that said that the incident was a Romulan ship that was used as a bomb that was sent at warp speed that collided into a space station, and its quantum core exploded several outposts, Federation outposts in the area. You can tell that novel was written after 9/11. It was a bit too on the nose in that regard. But apparently in that novel it turned out that no one was actually on board these space stations, and that the Federation planted the whole thing, and that the Romulan ship was actually this whole a Starfleet intelligence operation to make the Romulans look bad. But now that's getting into the whole 9/11 truther thing, which I'm not sure if that was intended. But anyway, so I don't regard that novel. I don't take this. So really, there's no answer of what the Tomed incident is. But I'm perfectly happy with the whole Treaty of Alderaan thing. I think that makes sense. I think it makes sense for Picard to uphold it. I've heard people saying that actually agreeing with Admiral Pressman that they were right to try to subvert the treaty. I disagree with that. Like, if you want to subvert, if you don't want the treaty to be in place anymore, negotiate. Like, don't sneak behind their backs and do something that could cause war. Like, no, that's fucking stupid. Admiral Pressman's in the wrong. These assholes are in the wrong, just like Section 31 often is in the wrong. But anyway, yeah, I heard some people defend Section 31. I completely disagree with that. I think Section 31 absolutely shouldn't exist, and the Federation would have been just fine without them. But that is a topic for another time. But so as far as the treaty, so this is the first episode that mentioned the treaty and that Starfleet can't create cloaking technology because of this treaty. It would be utilized later on in Deep Space Nine when Ronald D. Moore joined the show, probably not coincidentally, when they came up with the plot point where Deep Space Nine got a warship, a Starfleet warship, the Defiant, that was armed with a cloaking device. And the reason why it had a cloaking device is because they came up with an agreement with the Romulans, because the Romulans were also worried about the Dominion and the Gamma Quadrant. So the Romulans didn't want to risk their own ships, so they let Starfleet risk it for them. But they agreed to give them a cloaking device, loan them a cloaking device, if Starfleet agreed it would only be used in the Gamma Quadrant, and if they would give them all the intelligence they have on the Dominion in exchange. And also, there was a character in the first episode that was introduced, this Romulan character who was meant to be a recurring character who would guard the cloaking device, and that would make total sense. And that would have been great if they kept her as a recurring character. I don't know why they didn't. That actually makes no sense. It makes no sense why the Romulans would just let them have a cloaking device without any supervision, because Cisco did break the agreement from time to time and did use it in the Alpha Quadrant. But anyway, that is neither here nor there. And also, when the Romulans made a peace treaty with the Dominion, they should have revoked that cloaking technology from the Defiant, but I don't think they actually did that. But anyway, this is Deep Space Nine stuff. I'm getting off topic here. I do have to mention Captain Picard Day. must mention Captain Picard Day. This was actually, they have these like humorous, funny little intros or whatever that are not relevant for the rest of the episode. This one was a memorable one. I think Lower Decks actually referenced this and made fun of this as well, which is great because it was such a... I loved it, the whole Captain Picard Day and Riker doing his impersonation of Picard being, I'll be on the bridge, number one. Like, that was really funny. And when Picard was talking to the admiral and she was asking, Captain Picard Day? He's like, I'm a role model. And she's like, okay, I'm sure you are. And then hangs up on him. That was great. I loved it. So yeah, no, this is a really, really good episode. So, I would now like to thank my Patreon supporters for supporting me on Patreon. It's very much appreciated. Does help me continue with the channel. Does help me keep going. Absolutely. Very much thankful for everyone's support, so I'd like to give a huge special thanks to Jordan Johnson, Brandon Neal Howells, and Antarius. Thank you all so very, very much for your strong support. I would also like to give a shout out to Benjamin Mead, Greg Marley, Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Matty Jester, Joel Lavals, Alessandro, Michelosio, Norman Buchwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, and Allison Fordyce. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. So we do have a few patron comments on this episode. First comment is from Kyrie091, who says, the Pegasus, more like the mega shit. Evil John Locke, not the same without Sawyer calling him Mr. Clean. Just don't tell him what he can't do. Yeah, the mega shit's... that's a pretty good pun, except for the fact this episode's great. Anyway, next comment is, wow, this looks like a long one, is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, Picard goes back to his old ways. I don't like kids phase. When the Admiral asks, oh, what is Captain Picard Day? He pretends he cares. I know now why Jack Crusher hated him and Beverly never told him about being a father. Then the Borg Queen was defeated by the power of love. If I was rich, I would have thrown my TV out the fecking window for that piece of shit. Riker acts like himself for the first 20 minutes and then suddenly he staples his own mouth closed. He refused to tell Captain Picard anything. If I remember, did he tell Deanna Troi as we see on the Enterprise? As we saw on Enterprise. Let me do a quick check. Riker, it won't be long before they find the Pegasus. Troi, you haven't made your decision. The holodeck? Riker, they rescued the Andorian's daughter. Troi, so you're coming to the moment of truth in there as well. Riker, I need you to promise you'll keep this confidential. Troi, you know I will. Riker, what do you know about the Treaty of Alderaan? Troi, 2311, it redefined the Romulan neutral zone. Riker, it was outlawed the use of cloaking technology on Starfleet vessels. Troi, the Pegasus. Riker, a secret group in Starfleet security developed a prototype. Pressman was put in charge of testing it. Troi, that's why they're so eager to find it before the Romulans do. Riker, the accident, the 71 people who died, we were testing the cloaking device. Troi, it was covered up. Riker, the 9 of us who made it back alive were sworn to secrecy. Troi, and you've lived with that for 12 years? Riker, they want to pick the experiment up where they left off. Troi, are you sure? Riker. Pressman told me himself what they're doing is wrong. It could jeopardize the treaty. Troi, and you want to tell that to Captain Picard? Riker, I took an oath of secrecy. Pressman still outranks the captain. Pressman and Captain Picard outranks Deanna Troi, but you told her. I will ask Mark what What is that called? I give you a clue. It starts with an H. I wonder why he told Troy and not Picard. Maybe it was his weekly counseling sessions with Deanna Troi. Wink, wink. Troy, Will, you didn't get this far in your career by making easy decisions. I'm confident you'll make the right one now. Pressman, sounds like the best solution is to take the Enterprise in. Riker, into the asteroid? Pressman, that's right. Put this fissure on the main view screen. The chasm is large enough for us to maneuver in. Besides, if we ever hope to salvage the Pegasus, we're going to need a starship to do it. Picard, Mr. Data. Data. It is theoretically possible, sir, but I am unaware of any prior situations where a starship was taken so deeply inside a planetary body. There may be unforeseen difficulties. Picard, Admiral, I don't think we can risk it. Pressman, I've made my decision. Prepare to take the Enterprise in. Captain, that's an order. Picard, Mr. Data, will you please note in the ship's log that the action is being taken over my explicit objection. When Riker is alone with Pressman on the Pegasus, he suddenly gets a backbone and rips into Pressman. While you could not, could you not do this on the Enterprise bridge, you coward? Back on the Enterprise, Riker still doesn't say anything until the last possible moment. Riker, Captain, I have a suggestion. There's a piece of equipment in Admiral Pressman's quarters under guard and which might get us out of here. It's a prototype for a Federation cloaking device. Feck this Riker should have told Picard straight away, but waited till he had no choice. Riker should have beamed himself, Pressman, and the piece of equipment straight to the bridge. Shelby, all you know how to do is play it safe. I suppose that's why someone like you sits in the shadow of a great man for so long as you have, passing up one command after another. Proceed to deck 8. Riker, when it comes to this ship and this crew, you're damned right I play it safe. Oh, really, Riker? Where was your concern for the ship and crew, you jackass, in this episode and the episode Gambit in honor of Enchantment of Eternity's first short, which I forgot about? I'm going to say something that will make Mark have multiple cardiac arrests. Even Romulan came clean well before the last possible moment, and you know how much I love that character. It's strange that the quality of life and chain of command are back-to-back episodes and Riker's almost crying about Captain Picard's life. I know he wasn't crying, but this was about what about this Bullocks deserves. If this episode took place in Season 1, I would have bought Riker not telling Picard. Season 7, there was no way in hell he would do this. Does Riker deserve to be on the list for Star Trek Dumbest Criminals? No, he doesn't. He gets the reward for Star Trek's Dumbest Idiots. Riker should have been demoted for this, or even kicked out of Starfleet, as this was illegal and Riker did absolutely nothing about it. As Zek would say, shame on you! Regardless, this episode, I absolutely loved it. Even if Riker is 100% out of character, Ronald D. Moore wrote this. He sure writes out of the box from time to time. At least it's not his biggest out-of-this-world episode. At least Riker isn't a supercomputer. So my rating is 10. Something similar happened with myself, and I did the same thing as Riker. Waited for the last possible moment. The person I told said the same bullshit as Picard at the end of this episode, as she praised me for telling the truth. I was like to myself, no, I didn't. And I only told because I had no other choice. Out of 10. So I think I'm going to have to put a limit of word count on these comments, because that was a long one, but I think you've warned me about this before. So, yeah, I think there are a couple things in that very long comment that I wanted to address. Oh, yeah, so ultimately I disagree with you on this. understand. I know, and it's interesting. You made it clear it was like personal for you, and I get that. But for me personally, I totally get Riker, and I totally get that what he did, and I understand why, and I don't think it's out of character for him. So here's the thing. So you bring up these are the voyages as evidence, because you point out what Riker said to Troy in that episode, but I don't count that. Because I forgot to mention these are the voyages that it takes place during this, which is stupid. It doesn't fit at all. Like, Riker wouldn't be... You can't imagine in between scenes Riker spending the time on the holodeck being in the Enterprise. Like, that just doesn't fit. It's too much of a tense situation. He's too relaxed in that episode. It's just so jarring and stupid, and so I kind of don't even consider that canon as more... because it's just dumb. It's just poorly written. It doesn't fit. So I reject any evidence from that episode that he told. The reason why he told Troy and not Picard is because it was written in some other stupid goddamn episode that was bullshit, and it was necessary for the plot of that dumbass episode. So I reject anything from that episode. So that's first of all. Secondly, as I said, he was under orders from Pressman. Like, I think you are underestimating what a big deal it is for a Starfleet officer to flat out defy orders, especially from a superior, from an admiral. That is a huge fucking deal, and I think you're being a bit unrealistic expecting him to do it willy-nilly. And I think he did it when it was necessary, not at the last possible moment, but when it was no longer viable, where he couldn't stomach, where he had to be pushed to an extreme, where he would rather lose his career than let this go on, where it became a life and death situation. And I think that's perfectly acceptable. I think he did the right thing. I'm with Picard on this one, and I actually think this is in character for Riker, because he doesn't just defy, he's not Kirk, he doesn't just defy admirals whenever the fuck he feels like that shit doesn't fly in the 24th century, even though it did in the 23rd century. So yeah, I side with Picard. Sorry. Anyway, next comment is from Jordan Johnson, who says, I love the banter between Picard and the Romulan captain. I hope our sudden appearance didn't startle you. Not at all, says Picard, chuckling. Then he adds my favorite line of the episode. But your unannounced appearance might have unfortunate consequences. It would be an awful shame if your ship were damaged due to some misunderstanding. Yeah, now that's a great line, but I actually prefer the Romulans' response to that as, oh, I really appreciate your concern for my ship, but I don't think we were ever in any danger. Like, that's also bad. Like, the whole scene is so good. Like, I love this Romulan commander. Anyway, next comment is from Greg Marley, who says, Season 7 seems to me, and I think others, as an overall being somewhat sort of a disappointment. I remember reading somewhere that this was at least partly because the writers didn't know this would be the last year, and they were withholding some of the better material until it would be fleshed out fully for Season 8. I don't know if that's true, but this episode stands out to me as one of the relatively few of Season 7 that's really compelling and interesting. It's nice to get some explicit backstory on why the Federation doesn't employ cloaking. It's a great spotlight for Riker Frakes, and the actor who plays the Admiral is perfect in bringing to life someone who believes he's doing the right thing for his side, but ultimately must be rejected since he's willing to employ unscrupulous means. So, that would go against what I heard. I think that the writers did know that Season 7 would be the last season. I'm not sure at what stage in the development of Season 7 they were. Where I know Michael Piller was aware from the start of Season 7, because they started developing Voyager in between Season 6 and 7 because they knew that TNG was coming to an end. and that they were moving to movies. So they knew this before season 7 started. I don't know if all the writers did or if it was just Michael Piller, but I do know that fairly early in season 7, Ronald D. Moore and Brennan Braga were tasked with writing Star Trek Generations. So they knew that that Star Trek was coming to an end and that it was moving to movies. Or TNG, I would say, is coming to an end. So I would venture a guess to say that they all knew that fairly early on, if not the entire season 7, that it would be the last season. So I don't think that is the reason why season 7 is weak. As I discussed in other videos, it actually had more to do with the fact, and I realized you made this comment before you saw those videos or before I released those videos, so I understand. But as I mentioned in other videos, that this is more due to the fact that they were doing too much at the time, that Michael Piller and Jerry Taylor and Rick Berman were creating Voyager, and Michael Piller was busy over in Deep Space Nine Season 2, and Ronald D. Moore and Brennan Braga were writing Generations, which only left Noreen Shankar and Renee Echevarria as the only writers who weren't doing other shit in the writing staff on TNG, and they were overloaded with too much work because of that. And Renee Echevarria apparently was working on a ridiculous amount of scripts all the time. So that is actually the reason why season 7 is deemed by others to be sort of a lesser seasons, because they were doing too much. Rather than they were withholding stuff for season 8. But also, as you would know from my other videos, I disagree with everyone on season 7 being a lesser season. It's actually one of my favorite seasons. I think it is a lot better than a lot of people give it credit for. It's probably my fourth favorite seasons, behind seasons 3, 6, and 4. But I still like it. I still think it's in the upper echelon of the really good seasons. I think actually season 5 is lesser quality than season 7 in my humble opinion. But yeah, season 5 is just more boring. I think it's just me, my style. I like Ronald D. Moore and Renee Echevarria. I'm not a big fan of Joe Menaski. Joe Menaski was more involved in season 4, and Renee Echevarria was more involved in season 7. I think that has part to do. I just like the style of it. I'm not saying because I know those particular writers were involved. I'm just saying the writers might explain why I prefer that style of season 7 over the style of season 5. I was going to say 4, but I actually think 4 and 7 to me are on par, actually. They're like right there. If someone puts my feet to the fire, I'll probably choose season 4 over season 7, but I think they're pretty much on par as far as quality goes. But again, I do like season 7 much more than other people. That's not to do with this episode, because most people do agree, as you pointed out, that this is one of the better episodes of season 7. For me, it's more of episodes like Dark Page, Phantasms, Thine Own Self, Preemptive Strike. These I think are amazing episodes, and other episodes of season 7 I really like Dark Page, Masks, Force of Nature, where most people think those episodes suck. So that's more the reason why I think season 7 is a lot better, because I like these episodes better than most other people do. And my sister called this episode overrated, so she disagrees, and I don't think it's overrated at all. I think it's rated correctly, but that is just me. Anyway, next comment is from Antarius, who says, certainly one of the best episodes of season 7. Throughout this episode, tension and suspense remain high. The light-hearted teaser about Picard Day, although it doesn't fit the overall tone of the episode, was funny. I wonder if they used real drawing from children's fan mail for display. In my opinion, this episode collides with the Enterprise incident, where they had no such doubts about stealing and using a cloak, because they had acquired a functioning cloak. Then secret research in the Federation had passed the prototype stage already. But maybe that can be explained away by the fact that this is a phase cloak of totally new design, it was a good idea to find an excuse to have a cloaking device later on Defiant, as it made more stories possible. What bothered me is certainly not the best idea for the Admiral and Riker to have their conversation in such a public space where they can be overheard very easily. And how can they breathe on board the Pegasus when there seems to be a vacuum that conserved everything? Sadly, we never see how this story continues. I imagine Pressman will face no consequences and Section 31 will continue experimenting. I will give this one a strong 9 out of 10. So I actually think the differences between this and the Enterprise instance can be narrowed down to the fact that the Enterprise incident takes place nearly 100 years before this, before the treaty was signed, because they say the treaty was 60 years old. Enterprise incident happened 100 years before this. So that treaty didn't exist at this time, and therefore that explains why Starfleet had no compunctions of creating their own cloaking device or stealing their own cloaking device. So I think that's the answer, not the phasing thing. Yeah. So, but as far as there being atmosphere or breathable air on the Pegasus, actually Data explained this in the episode. He said he was going to use the Enterprise force fields to reinstate the Pegasus and bring their systems back online. And those systems, of course, would include life support, and so it would pump oxygen back into this bubble that Data's created. Although some of that I inferred, but I think that's easy to infer that life support includes oxygen. I think that's a given, personally. But anyway, so, but yes, no, I do appreciate your thoughts on this episode, and I agree, it's definitely a really good one. So final comment we have from Norman Buchwald, who says, Riker just won't believe in the island, apparently. Oh wait, I got my shows mixed up. Truly, this is definitely one of the greatest Riker stories, and we learn a little bit about his past, and it's especially interesting recalling Riker's distrust with Romulan and Tam Eldrum, because people apparently died in both cases, and yet Riker was part of a buried scandal where this also happened, enough so that to this day no episode has since revisited this fact after the retcon. Perhaps Laren couldn't give him a slam in Picard Season 3 with someone who now would know about the Pegasus incident. The only true controversy of this episode is, of course, it doesn't get quite continuity-wise for These Are the Voyages. But other than that, this story where Riker finally realizes now what the treaty and what would be at stake, does he finally stand up to Admiral Pressman? Granted, not until the Enterprise was trapped in the asteroid, not an epiphany he had while running a simulation on the holodeck. If that was the case, then Riker's decision to tell Picard still waited for him to head to the Pegasus in the end scenery with Pressman and waited until it was confirmed they were trapped and Riker had a solution. Hardly sounds like Riker really went with his decision until he was backed into a corner. In spite of these problems with These Are the Voyages, I still give Pegasus 10 phase cloak wings out of 10. No, you definitely should not count the flaws of These Are the Voyages against this episode. These Are the Voyages was written years later, and any problems with that episode not fitting into this episode is a problem with that episode. As I say, I just discount that because that was just poorly written bullshit. The way they tried to shove that whole storyline into taking place during the Pegasus is bullshit, and is one of the, even though I don't hate These Are the Voyages as much as most people do, I actually think it's an okay episode and not the worst fragrant piece of shit that most people think it is. But But the thing I hate most about that episode, and in fact I hate it more than everyone's complaining, oh, their focus is on Riker and Troy when it's supposed to be a finale for Enterprise. Like, that actually bothers me less, maybe because I have a lesser opinion of Enterprise. And it was Rick Berman's idea that Enterprise, that finale would be a finale not just for Enterprise, but for the entire Berman era of Star Trek, because that was it. That was the last episode of the Berman era, if you want to call that. I fucking don't really like that term because I hate Rick Berman, but fair to call it. From the era of Star Trek Next Generation to Enterprise, that was the last episode. So for me, it actually makes a lot of sense, and I probably, because I don't like Enterprise all that much, it makes sense for that they tie up that. So that part of it doesn't bother me when it bothers most people. What bothers me about that episode is the fact they tried to cram into the Pegasus storyline, and it just does not fit. So yeah, ultimately that has nothing to do with this episode. The bullshit that they do later doesn't affect this episode. Again, I just discount anything from that episode. And you're right, and that's part of the reason why it doesn't fit in, is because, and that's what I said when I first saw These Are the Voyages, when Riker's like talking to Troy in the holodecks, you're right, I'd made my decision, I'm going to tell Captain Picard. I'm like, bullshit, that's not how he told it. He didn't already decide going in. It was a spur of the moment decision when he finally realized that Pressman had gone too far, and it kind of degrades the episode to think about it that way. That's why I just discount that whole thing. But anyway, I did forget to talk about the Admiral cliche with Admiral Pressman. This is actually one of the worst examples of the evil Admiral trope, but since it's such a good episode, I am willing to forgive it. It's one of the better examples, I would say, of the evil Admiral trope. And goddamn, Terry O'Quinn does such a good job. But yeah, he is mad at Riker for not believing in the island. See, the problem is that Riker is a man of science, but Admiral Pressman is a man of faith. And don't tell him what he can't do. Okay, enough of that. So thank you so much, patrons, for your comments. So my rating for the Pegasus out of 10 is going to be a 10. The best. And this is another one of those cases where I changed my mind on what rating I would give this episode mid-review. Just the more great things I was saying about it, the more I was analyzing this episode, the more I was thinking about it, the more I liked it. Because in the past, I believe I've given this episode a 9, and I came into this review thinking I would give this episode a 9. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, this is a damn good episode. It's not overrated. It's rated correctly. It's such a good episode that deals with, I think, the way it deals with Riker's past is brilliant. The dynamic between Pressman and Riker is brilliant. It fixes the plot hole of Starfleet not having cloaking technology. It has some brilliant Romulan commander with some great banter between him and Picard that is so memorable. And Captain Picard, like everything in this episode just works. I think this is a shining example of why everyone's wrong about season 7. It's not an exception. It is the rule. Most episodes of season 7 are really good. You know it to be true. Anyway, so that is it for my review of the Pegasus. Thank you so much for checking out my video. If you did enjoy it, please do me a favor. Leave a like. Leave a comment. All that kind of thing helps me in the algorithm. And if you really enjoyed this video, and if you really want to support the channel and what I do, you can consider supporting me on Patreon. There is a link in the description below. There's different tiers for different budgets, different rewards such as pre-releases, making comments that I read on my videos, and a Patreon-only series where I do videos exclusively for Patreon supporters where I revisit reviews that I have already done. So if you want, you can check that out, but if not, you can still support the channel, giving me a like, subscribing, all that stuff also is very much appreciated and does really help. So let's see what's coming up next on the old channel here. Monday will be my review for The Alternate. Wednesday will be my review for Homeward, another great Season 7 episode. See, Season 7 is really good. And Thursday will be my review for Lower Decks Season 5, Episode 8. And then on Saturday, I'll be over on Patreon doing another exclusive Patreon Revisited, this time revisiting my review for Sub Rosa. Okay, so not every episode of Season 7 is great, but hey, every season has their downers. But anyway, I'll be recovering the worst episode of Star Trek Next Generation, in my opinion, over on Patreon next Saturday. Anyway, thank you so much for checking out this video. Be sure to check me out as I continue to cover Star Trek Next Generation and Star Trek Deep Space Nine, one episode at a time, and many other shows as well, including Star Trek Lower Decks. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.